just make sure that they come in and sit down. Yeah, nope, you'll be fine. Get everybody seated down. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before I start, let me just introduce a couple of folks that I'm really honored to have here with me. Ms. Sonia Martinez from the Rape Recovery Center, Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and Aaron Van Berkel. Thank you so much for coming. We are here today because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It's time to talk about the problem of sexual assault in our country and draw attention to this issue and the need that we all have to share to report sexual assault, to hold perpetrators accountable, and to talk about the resources that are available to our survivors of sexual assault to help each individual survivor help them through their journey of healing. The scope of this problem is overwhelming, as you can see in the board that is over here that has some national statistics, as well as some of our time and place for the state of Utah as well. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center has determined that 1 in 2 women have experienced sexual violence other than rape in their lifetime. 1 in 5 women have experienced completed or attempted rape in their lives, and women have a 50 to 95% chance of developing post-traumatic stress disorder after being raped. This is a crime that leaves emotional scars long after the body has healed. Nationally, around 67.5%, almost 7 out of 10 rapes are not reported. In the state of Utah, that's almost 9 out of 10. 88 out of 100 women will not report in this state. Among college women, 9 out of 10 victims of sexual assault knew the person who assaulted them. For men, the numbers are much lower. 1 in 67 men in the U.S. have experienced rape or attempted rape, and 1 in 5 men have experienced sexual violence other than rape in their lifetime. This is a national crisis. This is a local crisis. This is a crisis that we all have a responsibility in. We have to use our voices to prevent sexual assault. To do that, we need to believe survivors, challenge victim blaming, and respect boundaries. And for us as institutions, law enforcement and prosecution, we have our own work to do because of secondary victimization and case attrition that occurs because of our antiquated processes and methodologies that we use. And we are learning, and we're trying to improve. We all have a role to play in this, to make our communities safer for our survivors of sexual violence. We must push back against the normalization of sexual violence in our culture, whether it is the media, whether it is the entertainment industry, or whether it is the thoughtless conversation that we have, or sometimes our nonverbal and body language of not believing survivors. We cannot fake our way through this. We have to have a commitment. So let me sort of tell you what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be followed here by some remarks from Sonia Martinez, the Executive Director of the Rape Recovery Center, and she will come and share some thoughts with you about the resources that are available to sexual assault survivors from her organization and what to expect if someone reaches out to them in need of assistance. Then I'm privileged to have Sheriff Rosie Rivera come and talk about the need to report and what to expect when you do report sexual assault to law enforcement. I will make a few remarks and then followed up by a very brave person, Erin Van Berkel, and she will talk about giving hope to those who are suffering because they're survivors of sexual assault. She will talk about her experience and how she's been able to stay so strong, and that she inspires us and gives us all courage. So with that, let me turn the time over to Ms. Martinez. Ms. Martinez.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sonia Martinez-Ortiz. I'm the Executive Director of the Rape Recovery Center. The Rape Recovery Center is one of 14 rape crisis centers across Utah. The Rape Recovery Center is the oldest and only standalone rape crisis center. And what that means is that our sole purpose is supporting survivors of sexual violence, as well as educating the community and working towards the prevention of sexual violence. 2024 is the 50th anniversary of the Rape Recovery Center. So we've been doing this work for 5 decades, and some things have changed and some things have not changed. What it's important to know is that we're here for any survivor. While we focus primarily on Salt Lake and Tooele counties, we don't turn any survivors away. We can be reached to accompany a survivor in the hospital during a forensic exam. Our in-house advocates can assist folks with navigating the criminal justice system, including filing a report if they choose to do so. We provide short-term case management and advocacy assistance to help the survivor navigate whatever services and needs they have towards their healing journey. We also have a team of in-house therapists who are trained specifically to work on trauma healing, and particularly as victims of sexual violence. One of the things that we often will experience is what we call a secondary survivor. So a person who is a friend, a family, a loved one, a relative, a neighbor calling because a loved one has just disclosed to them that they have been assaulted. We will work with those folks as well, and we provide a variety of resources, but primarily work to help people understand how they can most be supportive of the survivors in their life. And the first thing that we ask folks is to start by believing. The second thing we ask folks to do is to hear the survivor out and have them lead out in the process. It is very challenging as a person on the other side to not want to control or really encourage the survivor to go a particular direction in their healing journey. The most important thing you can do is be there with them, help them find the resources, help them navigate the systems. For anybody who has been assaulted, who may hear this message today, the Rape Recovery Center believes you, and we're here for you. And you are always welcome in our doors, on the phone, via email, and we'll do our best to support you. For the rest of the community, we all hold a responsibility in ending sexual violence. And what that looks like is starting by having conversations in the carpool, at the kitchen table, with our friends and family, so that we can create a culture that does no longer tolerate sexual violence.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was asked to talk a little bit about reporting of sexual assault. So it's very important that a sexual assault survivor report what occurred to law enforcement. You can do that by calling 911. You can call your local police department. If you're at a college, you can call your campus law enforcement department, and they will take the report. If you're being medically treated for injuries regarding the assault, you can also report it at the hospital. For children, you can take your child to Primary Children's Hospital. Everyone is trained on how to deal with these type of cases, and they know who to bring into the situation to ensure it's properly reported. Law enforcement are trained to interact with sexual assault survivors, and they can also connect you to a trained advocate who's also trained in that area. The advocate will accompany you through the reporting process, and in the event it involves children, The officers work closely with the Children's Justice Center and DCFS to provide services for the family and the survivor. We work together to organize the investigation. We try to ensure that we don't continue to ask repetition of questions and continue to interview. We try to limit as much as we can, but get all the information that's needed. And we will facilitate communication amongst all the agencies that have to be involved in these type of cases. What we want you to expect if you are a victim or a survivor of sexual assault, that you'll have privacy. It may take a while when you report. There may be additional interviews, so we need you to expect that. We will ask you to describe what happened and if you know who the perpetrator is. Some questions may feel uncomfortable, but remember that law enforcement officers are professionals just like doctors and teachers, and they are prepared to listen to what happened. You may hear the same questions more than once, but after a trauma, it can be difficult to describe the details of a situation. Repeating a question or asking a different way may prompt you to remember more details. You can have support in the interview. You can have an advocate or someone that you trust. Just know if you have someone that you trust in there, they could possibly become a witness in the case. You will be asked to describe what occurred, whether force was used, and also if the encounter was consensual. We will build a timeline of what occurred, and we'll look at any signs of premeditation or grooming behaviors by the perpetrator. A sexual assault forensics exam may be done to check for DNA evidence and other evidence which can play an important role in the case against the perpetrator. Law enforcement will meet with the multidisciplinary team to discuss the case and seek charges with the district attorney's office. We take every one of these cases serious. We need our communities to understand. Please report if you are a victim of a sexual assault. Please report it to us. Lastly, remember, we will believe you. Thank you.
And I want to take a second here to highlight several things. One, as I mentioned, nationally, almost 7 out of 10 victims and survivors will not report it. In Utah, it's higher. And to give you sort of a context of that, and the sheriff and I were talking about this a little bit just before we started, is that first of all, you'll see this is just a time and slice numbers in the last 12 to 13 months. And in the statewide, there were almost about 3,200 cases that were reported. So if you think about, in the most conservative way, that 10 to 20%, it only represents 10 to 20%. That 70 to 80% did not report them. So if there's 3,000 cases that were reported, it boggles the mind of those who have undergone this violence and failed to report it. And let's pause for a second there. What kind of a society and culture are we creating where survivors do not feel safe to be able to come forward and share that trauma? And that's our collective responsibility that we all have. The second part of that, while we're making incredible inroads, and I appreciate the sheriff sharing the process that we have, that we are also learning that the historical ways of our investigations actually undermine what we are trying to achieve, which is to respect and listen and give voice to survivors. There's no wonder historically why they don't feel comfortable coming forward when secondary victimization and case attrition that occurs through the process that we engage in. Historically, we would approach it by simply saying, what were you wearing? What were you doing? What was your level of intoxication? And the way that we would make the question and answer was almost like a cross-examination. And the neurobiology of trauma teaches us that we have this incredible survivor instinct in us. And that information is there that you can't ask yes or no questions, but you need to ask open questions. and those memories are there. And once we start to understand the neurobiology of trauma and change our orientation and our methodology, we're finding that we can get that information. We can actually start to process those cases without re-victimization of survivors. And that's a very important part of that. So in the state of Utah, if 88 won't report them and 12 do, historically 6 of those will be secondary case attrition, that they will fall off because of our procedural errors, the way that we approach this historically. And of the 6 that will eventually come to the district attorney's office, we'll file on approximately 4 out of those 6s. So pause for a second. Out of 100 victims, 4 get access to that measure of accountability and justice. We have to do better than that. We must do better than that. Once that case comes, that report comes, as the sheriff mentioned, the MDT process takes over, and that is a way by which we bring all different subject matter experts together to collectively look and review that case. And I wish I could say it was simple as that. It's not. While the harm is real, the trauma is real, the pain is real, our system, which is premised on evidence and premised on our procedural issues, is not always conducive to finding that measure of justice that we're trying to seek. And I acknowledge that because that's our systemic challenge that we have. And at the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office, we have incredible men and women who are committed as counselors. That is why we consciously created a few years ago the Survivor and Victim Support Services Division as a co-equal standalone division that was not only important symbolically but institutionally to have an equal spot in our organization, to respect and honor the challenges that we face and our survivors are going through. And at that point, we look for legal sufficiency. And let me make a point here. Just because we may not be able to go into a courtroom with the evidence does not mean that it did not happen. I want to be very clear about that. That's a different mechanism of evaluation. That's a structure that's there. And one of the things that we're looking deeply into ourselves as an institution, from the front desk all the way to my office, is that every person who comes in contact with a survivor, we want to communicate that we believe you, you have support, we are here with you, we will advocate for you, and we will respect in an honest way to share that information with you. The success, the failure, the strength of the case, so you are fully informed to make the decisions, and we will share that openly with you. And while holding offenders is very important and something we are absolutely committed to, we also understand a win and loss is not a judgment on the experience of a survivor. That beyond the courtroom, there is a commitment to your success and your healing journey that is critical, that is part of our objective to assist you. That you will be believed and you will be supported. And that is something that we can and must do. And the workload can be overwhelming. Last year, we filed some 1,200. These numbers are only some of the categories of the offenses that we're talking. This does not capture the totality of different kinds of sexual assault. But in some of these very specific categories, we filed almost 700 cases in the last 12, 13 months. We filed over 12 to 1,300 cases, and there's just far too many. But I want you to know that we are committed to supporting you. We will advocate for you. We will fight for you. But all of this is a collective responsibility that we all share in. It's not one person's job. This is something we as a society and a community have to come together. So I just want to take a second at this time to invite Erin Van Berkel to come and share her thoughts and her incredible courage through this experience. Erin.
Good morning. It's important for me to speak to you today and share a bit of my story because no one should have to go through this alone. Not everyone has an amazing support system built in like I do, and I want other survivors to know that there are resources available to you right here in the community. You are absolutely not alone. With the Victims Advocate Office and the Rape Crisis Centers, there is support and help available to you. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without them. It's been over 4 years since my rape, and I don't know that I've had a single session with my therapist that it wasn't at least part of the focus. I don't like talking about him and what he did. I don't like how much power he still has over my thoughts, but I have to have an outlet. That much focus on him would be really hard on my family because they hate what I went through, what I still go through because of him. That's why it's important that you know that there are resources available to you. I wish that I had known in the beginning that it wouldn't be completely clear that he was a bad guy. Initially, after I got him to stop, he started out really kind and contrite. It really confused me. Then he got nasty again. I responded with the ebbs and flows of his behavior that night, and it wasn't until I got to the hospital and was telling my story that a nurse said we needed to call the police because that was rape. It didn't matter that it started out consensual. When I said no and he kept going, it was rape. Even when he was kind for a little bit after, it was still rape. It seems obvious. Had anyone else told me the same story, I would have said that it was absolutely rape, but because it was me, I doubted myself. I don't know that I even made a fully conscious decision to come forward. Once the nurse pointed out that it was rape, she asked if she could call the police, and I was still doubting myself and whether or not my specific situation counted as rape. It wasn't until I had given my statement to the police and the doctor had come in and given me stitches to stop the bleeding, and I talked to my mom, that I was able to say that I was in fact raped. The Rape Crisis Center sent someone to be with me and hold my hand while the nurse did a physical exam. They had a little goodie bag that had sweatpants, a hairbrush, hair ties, I think even an adult coloring book with colored pencils to help me stay sane. I wore those sweatpants for weeks. I would take them off every few days to wash, and they were back on as soon as they came out of the laundry. I joked that they were made of armor because they just made me feel safe. Now they're just in my regular rotation of sweats and pajamas, because I don't need them to feel safe. But I was so grateful for them at the time. Having these resources helps me stay sane and process everything that I feel about that night and the years of court proceedings, and that even now, it's really scary to think of going on a date. It also helps my loved ones who are there for me, but are simply not equipped to take on everything that I need for someone else to help me hold. That's what the trained people with the Victims Advocates Office, the Rape Crisis Center, and my personal therapist are there for. They can take it on with me, then set it aside, which is important because it's a heavy load. Too heavy for my parents, kids, and best friends to have to hold too much of for too long. It's such a burden to bear, and it's easier to have a few different trained people to help carry the burden with you. I didn't have a choice about coming forward. I had to go to the hospital because I was bleeding so much. I don't know if I would have been brave enough to do so otherwise. It was incredibly scary. I just had to get the bleeding to stop. I honestly thought I might die from the blood loss. That does not mean that if you don't have physical symptoms, you don't need to come forward. It's not easy, but it's worth it to be able to tell your story and receive care and support. Once I made the report, I was later told that my rapist had been arrested and that there would be a hearing in a few weeks. This was right at the beginning of the pandemic, so it ended up being a much slower process than it normally would have been. It was a lot of waiting, a lot of court dates being rescheduled. He was in jail for about 6 weeks from the night of the rape until the first hearing. He was granted bail at that time. I really figured I was lucky that he'd even gotten those 6 weeks and that it was probably the only time he would serve. I was grateful for that time because I felt safe knowing that he was behind bars. I still see my therapist every other week, and I had a day just a couple weeks ago when I realized that I had not thought about my rapist at all the day before. It was the first time I had experienced that peace in the 4+ years since my rape. That gives me hope that I have more days in my future during which I don't think of him. The more time that passes, the less control he has over me, and that's due to the help that I've received and continue to receive by coming forward. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin, for sharing that. And thank you. I just want to say that you should have in the materials that you will get a sheet that has some of the resources in your stories. Please include that. It has a QR code that will also take you to some national information as well. Again, this is something that we collectively have a responsibility for. So thank you for drawing this attention, and we will be available, each one of us, for individual Q&As to you. Thank you for highlighting this, and thank you for making it a priority in our community. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we're going to do one interview with Erin. She's agreed to do it. I've talked to Daniela Rivera. She's going to ask the questions. Everyone, if you want to film the interview, feel free to point your cameras this way and do it, but we're just going to do one. We're going to keep it to one person asking questions. Okay? And then the other officials, Sim and the sheriff, will be available for interviews as well.